What the hell is this, Jim? This isn't a game. No, it's not. This is Blender. And due to popular demand, this is a video where I'm going to do a bit of behind the scenes about how I made my new intro. And by popular demand, I mean one person asked me to do it. But that's good enough for me. And that person was TableWolfMusic. This isn't going to be a comprehensive intro to 3D stuff, so I'll link to some great tutorials on 3D Buzz that cover the fundamentals. Blender is a free and open source program, so I'll put a link to that in the description bar in case you want to have a go with it yourself. I'm not going to be showing the process of making everything, just bits and pieces that will give you the general idea. This animation is of course very basic, models being based on a very old 3D game, but I guess that makes it a good place to start. But even if you're not interested in making 3D stuff, maybe you'll enjoy this just to see how the intro was made. Anyway, let's get on with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is stop this animation and go down here, load factory settings, and that will bring us back to how things will be when you first start up Blender. And I'm going to press T to get rid of this toolbox here, because I don't find it very useful. And first thing I guess I'll talk about is how we move around our scene. We've got the X, the Y and the Z axis. I'm not going to go into explaining too much of this, but to move around you hold in the middle mouse button or your mouse wheel and you move left to right, up and down, and you get this nifty 3D motion. And if you want to pan, you hold in Shift and do the same, and you move up, down, left, right. And if you want to zoom into one thing I like to do, go to User Preferences, go to Interface and click Zoom to Mouse Position, because this way, see, if my mouse is here and I zoom there, it goes to where the mouse is, and likewise. So that's very handy. And if you get totally lost and you've got an item selected, you can press the full stop on your the period, if you like, on your numpad, and it zooms to your current object. Anyway, the first thing I'm going to make is the tall blue building with the black sides, since that's a fairly simple object to start with. Now you can move the object around on these axes by grabbing these little gizmos and moving them. Now I don't want to do that, so I'm going to Control Z a few times to get back to where we were. Let's see, first thing to do is to make this taller, so I'm going to press S. That will go into scaling mode, and you can see we get this this little thing pointing out from the middle of the object, and the further I move away from the middle, the larger the object becomes. But we don't want to. It's scaling it in all dimensions, and we don't want to do that. If you press the Z key, it will now only be scaling on the Z axis, or the Z axis if you like. And I'll get that to roughly where I want it to be, and there we go. Now this grid is serving as a sort of virtual floor, so I want to bring this up a bit. Now we have a cuboid, and I'm going to go down and look at some of these reference images I've got. This is the object we'll be making. As you can see, it's very simple, but it's got these little stands and this sort of elevator protrusion at the bottom. So I'm going to make those out of other objects, and I'm going to go to Add, Mesh, Cube, and then we get another cube on the bottom. Obviously that's too big, so I'll press S, scale it down a bit. That looks about right. Now at this point you might be wondering, well, this is really fiddly, isn't it? Look at this, trying to get this into position. But fortunately we've got some nice snapping tools. If we go down here, this little magnet icon, snap during transform, click that, and next to it this thing, and we're going to select vertex. Now let's zoom in on this object here, and you can try to move it around like this, but I find when you're snapping, the best way to do it is press the G key, which is for move, but you know, G for grab if you like. Press G and you got this thing here, and it's moving in all three dimensions, so it's a bit difficult to tell. But if you move towards one of these points, one of the corners, the vertices, it will snap. So there, that's very exact and nice. So I'm just gonna, now we want 4 of these, so I'm gonna press Shift D to duplicate, and we get another one. If I snap that there, we get another foot. Again, for there, and again for there. And here we go. We've got our stands. Now the next thing we want to do is make our elevator debris. And because we want it to be exactly the same height as these, so I'm going to duplicate one of these again. First I'm going to turn off snapping and duplicate it, and now as you can see it's moving in all dimensions, and I haven't got snapping on, so I can't, if I move it, I can't just move it across. So what I'm going to do is, if you're in move mode, G mode if you like, hold in the middle mouse button, and you can see this little dotted white line coming out from where the original object was, and you see it's snapping to these grids. If you notice, it's snapping to the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. Now we want to move it on y because we want to get it there, and that will only move along that dimension and nowhere else. So do that, and then let go of the mouse button, and it will stick to that axis. Let go of the middle mouse button, it will stick to that axis. Then click left. There we go. And I'm going to have to change the size of this a bit. Now, something I've done wrong, if we go back and look at this, you can see, although I made the buildings in the animation have a square profile, these are actually, as you can see, quite rectangular. You can see they're quite much wider than they are deep. So let's do something to change that. Now, you select objects by right-clicking on them, so you can select like this, and just going to press S and then Y, and we can make it fatter. That's about right. Now, as you can see, these are all out of place now, so I'm going to turn on snapping again and move them, and there we go. You might have a bit of trouble getting the exact right point, but if you just play with it, it should work. But for this case, it seemed to work pretty well right away. Now let's turn off snapping and rescale this thing. So it needs, as you can see, got a better picture of it here. See, it's quite much wider than these stands. So I'm going to scale on the Y, S, then Y, and then S, then X. That looks about right. And now you can see it's sticking out the back, and if we try to move it, it's not going to be exact. So I'm going to turn snapping back on and go here and change this to edge. And now if I move along the x-axis, click and drag, it should... oh, there we go. When I move the mouse cursor actually to the axis, to the edge, I mean, you can see it's snapping and jiggling back and forth like crazy. But once you've got it there, let go of the mouse button, and there it is, exactly right. We need to add the detail, which is the windows, these big black areas, and the elevator door. And you could do this with textures, but I'm just going to make it with geometry, which is polygons. So now we're going to get into object edit mode. Now if we press tab, we go into edit mode. You can see, you can also change it down here, object or edit mode. So we're in edit mode, and we want to select faces. There are three things that make up a 3D object. There's the faces, which is the big face, the edges, which are the lines, and the vertices, which are the points. Now by default we're in vertex select mode. I'm clicking right mouse button to select those, but we don't want to be in that. So if you press, when you're in this mode, press Control Tab, and you can select which type of mesh bit you want to select. Click face. I'm going to click the front face. So now we've got this face selected. Now you could do something here with subdivisions, which means like dividing up this polygon into smaller polygons. But I'm going to do this is a bit of a weird introduction if this is your first 3D thing. This is a weird introduction to extrusions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an extrusion of 0 length. But just to show you what an extrusion is, I'm going to press E, and I've still got snapping on. That doesn't matter. But you can see basically it extrudes out. You can also extrude in, or intrude if you like. But this is actually handy that I've got edge snapping on, because what I'm doing here by creating an extrusion that has no length, I'm creating... I'll click left there to create that. Now I've got extra polygons between this here and this here, and this will become evident when I click S, and oops, I'm going to have to turn off edge snapping here. I'll press escape to undo that. Then I'll go down here, turn off edge snapping, press S again, and you can see, I'll just make that size, you can see these extra polygons here, 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 and here have been created by the extrusion. They're equivalent of, if I just drag this out, you can see by making a 0 length extrusion. Yeah, I think you get what I mean. I'm not very good at explaining these things, but anyway, that's how you make an extra polygon there. And the reason for making that is so we can colour it differently. So I'll do that on all sides. I'll turn snapping back on to be precise. Press E, click, then snapping off, S, shrink it a bit. Doesn't have to be perfect. Unless you're a perfectionist, in which case it does. Snapping on. No, not S. Press escape. E. Click there. Snapping off. S. And there. Yeah, that isn't perfect by any means. But you can fiddle with it if you really want to. Another thing you can do, if you really want to be precise, I'm going to undo that there. You can press S and you can type in a value. You can see down here, I'm messing up my mesh there, but I'm just pointing with the mouse cursor here. See all those numbers? You can input them manually. So if I do say 0.8 return, I get a precise measure. Now that's not exactly the right size, but let's go with S.9. There, that looks about right, but unfortunately I've already done the others, so it's not really important. You can just, you know, on the animation I saw, you wouldn't really be seeing that much detail. It's not necessary to be absolutely precise all the time, especially if you're not going to see the result. I'm not going to do the back because I don't think there was a window on the back because it's got the elevator shaft and stuff in it. And anyway, and also you're not going to see it in the animation. Now press Tab to go out of Object Edit mode, and right-click the elevator bit here. Press numpad dot to zoom in. Now we're going to edit this to create the panels for the doors. Press Tab to go into edit mode. Now there's a few ways we can do this, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to press Control R. Now what this does is it creates an edge loop. You can see as I move around this thing, I get all these sort of virtual purple lines. Now you can see it's alternating depending on where my mouse is to 3 different axes, and the way we want it is there. And if I scroll my mouse wheel up once, click, I get 2 loops around, as you can see, along the different axes as well. But I want it there, so I'm going to click. Now we have the beginning of our door. I'm going to do this again. Now actually before I do that, I'm going to press S and Y because I want to drag these out. I'm scaling, so but only on these selected edges. So that's about right. But of course we need the horizontal line through here. So I'm going to press Control R again, and that's where we want the line, so click, and now we can adjust its height about there. And we're not going to have the doors opening or anything, they're just going to be staying shut and staying, as you can see here, they're just one colour. So to emulate that, there's no need to create like the actual door mechanism or any separation or what. So press Tab to go out, and now you can see that all of our efforts seem to be for nothing because you can see no more detail. But in order to see that detail, we're going to have to apply some materials. Now obviously I'm not going to get into a big long thing about materials, but very simply I'm just going to drag this out here and go over to this button here, which is the material button, and create a new material. Click new, and you can give it a name. Click in here, we'll just call it blue. Oops, I can't spell there. Okay, and diffuse is this little like swatch thing here. But before I click that, I'm going to go into paint.net. It's a very simple paint program. It's free too, so I'll link to that as well. And I'll just grab one of these colours. Let's get this one. Click there, click more here, and we can get the hex value 42846C. Copy that, go back into Blender, and we can click here and we get this colour selector. But I'm going to go over to hex here, click, and paste. return, and now we have this colour. Now it might look a bit different because there's all kinds of shading and stuff. You can click these things here to see different sort of previews of what it looks like on different objects, like a monkey head. That's pretty cool. And I'm going to take the specular down. You see this shiny bit here? That's the specular. So I'm going to take that down because I don't want it to be a shiny material like a snooker ball. And so now we've selected that, and let me see, why isn't it? Oh, it's because I've got this thing selected down here. Yeah, I thought I'd had this larger object selected, but I've got that one selected. So you can see it's turned it blue. But we didn't want to do that. I was selecting this, so I'm going to go back to this object, and you can see it's got a default material applied. I'm going to click this button here, which allows us to browse the different materials available. I'm going to select blue, and there we go. It's made our nice thing blue. Now, to get the different colours for the window, I'm going to click Tab to go into edit mode, and you can start to see our polygons coming back. I'm still in face mode, I think. No, I'm not. So I'm going to click Control Tab to go into face mode. Click, and right click on our front window here. And I'm going to click this plus button here to add a new material slot. Then I'm going to click New and just grab our diffuse, drag this down to a complete blackness, which is very unrealistic and doesn't exist, you know, in any proper scene, but just for the sake of it. And then I'm going to click Assign. Now this object has two materials applied to it because the object consists of this whole box, but this particular face now has a black material applied to it. I'm going to rename that black. There. Oh, be black, whatever. It will be black, yeah. Now I'll just right click there and click black and assign. Go around here, right click, black and assign. Now click tab, and we can see we've got a nice, and you can see it's got a bit of specular highlight in it. When I drag around, you can see it's sort of shiny depending on the way the light is hitting it. I left that on. You might see it very briefly on the window of the taxi in the intro. Now I'm going to select all these feet and turn them blue too. There we go. Now I need to, oops, I just click, if you left click you move this 3D cursor around, which I find very difficult, not very useful when you're moving it in 3D, but because clicking on a two-dimensional space to determine a 3D position isn't very intuitive to me. But anyway, it's not relevant unless we're using it. So I'm going to right click on the elevator bit, zoom in, and go into object edit mode with tab, and let's see what colours we want. Let's go down here. Now you can see this has got different colours on each side, and it's actually got a different colour for the bottom here, but you're not going to see that. If you want to, you can go in and colour every polygon a different colour, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to select this grey colour here, which is hex 848484, which is right down the middle of grey, absolute medium grey. And so actually I'm going to go out of edit mode because I want to assign this to the whole thing. So I'm going to click there to make a new material, click new, click diffuse, hex, and paste in that value. Now it's not applying because I have in here two materials, and the one on the top is like the priority. I'm just going to change this to grey. There. Now if I click on blue and click the minus to get rid of it, that doesn't destroy the material, it just removes it from this object. The whole thing goes grey. Now we want the doors to be a different colour, so this is basically the same. I might have done a different colour, but you know, let's just for the sake of expediency, select this face here. I press tab to go into edit mode, right click there to select that face. Then I'm going to go to here, the browse material button, and click blue. Oops, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Because I was pressing the wrong button. I'm going to go back and select grey again, and I was supposed to press the assign button. Nope, because yeah, sorry, I'm still a bit new to this. Click plus, then click browse, because then we've got two materials in our material slot. This list here applies to this object in particular, not to all objects or to some kind of abstract material thingy, but I'm great at describing this, aren't I? Anyway, click assign, and there we have our blue door. So that's starting to look a bit more like the object in the intro, isn't it? Now, since this object may not be where we want it to be when we've finally finished, it can be annoying if I want to move the thing, because as you can see, it's all made of disparate pieces. So I'm just going to undo a few times to undo that mess. So if we want to add some, we want to stick them all together, we can do it this way. Hold in Shift and right click on all the objects to select a bunch of them. There, we've got all our 6 objects, and press Ctrl J and it becomes all one object. And you can see, because I had this is the anchor point. Now this little bit here, it's not too important if we're just moving things about, but if we're going to rotate, I'm going to show you that quickly. You can click here, or you can press R, and you can see it's rotating around that point. Now that may not be ideal because that's just its weird leg thing. So I'm going to press Escape to undo that, and I'm going to undo again because I don't want that to be the center of it. So if I keep holding in Shift and right click again on this, you can see its outline changes. So this is the sort of primary object in this multiple selection. So if I now press Ctrl J, now it's centered nicely on the middle of this cube here instead. And if we rotate, I'm going to click this, and you get these nice little rotate gizmos. What you do is you just click on one, left click, and you pull it around. Isn't that fun? And you can do it on other axes too. You can do that, and you can do that. Also, if you press R and then whatever axis you want to rotate on, like say Z, you can do that too. And you can also put in an angle like 90. You can see it there in the bottom. Then press return and you get a perfect 90-degree angle rotation. Anyway, but I don't want to do that right now, so I'm going to undo, go back into transform mode, which is move mode. Sorry, translate. Transform is moving, rotating, and scaling. Translate is moving. So yeah. Anyway, it's all 3D jargon stuff. So now we have a nice building, and what good is a building without land to stand on? That's just a building floating in space. That's no good. So let's make some ground. And the way I did this, I just made a plane, which is a kind of mesh with no, it's just the side of a cube. So you go to add mesh plane, and then we get this little plane in here, but that's way too small. So what I'm going to simply do is zoom out a bit, have my mouse cursor close to the middle, press S, and then move it out, make it very big. Now, I made it much bigger than that in the intro. So big it was almost too big to even see the edges, and that was kind of the point, because it was supposed to be effectively infinite to the horizon or whatever. But this is good enough just to show off, and it's automatically been, because the 3D cursor is still at this 0 point. I think I managed to move it back fairly accurately. It's right in sync with this virtual grid plane here. But if we want to take a proper look at its exact location, we can press N to bring up this thing here, drag up here, and we can see its X, Y, and Z location in numerical value. And you can see they're a bit off 0, so I'm going to right click on any one of these and click Reset All to Default Values, which is 0. You can see now this is nicely centered at 0, 0, 0. Press N again to get rid of that. Now, you can see there's a little bit of separation. This building is floating above just a bit. So I'm going to right click on the building, and because we've grouped it, it's all selected. And I'm going to drag down through Z just until there, until it pokes through. If you want to, you can mess about with the snapping and snap to faces and things and edges or whatever. But it doesn't really matter too much if the mesh is intruding a little bit. So now this grey floor doesn't look very good, so I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go to, I was going to grab this, but this is a red planet, and I don't like that. I don't want to live on Mars, so so I'm just going to use my best guess. I'm going to click New, click there to get a different material. Let's see. Just going to mess about a bit till I get something that looks grassy. Yeah, that'll do. Take off the specular because grass isn't shiny. Take the intensity down to 0, and then we have our building on some grass. Oop! I just pressed the full stop button, and it zoomed out to see this whole plane. Right click on the building again, press that again, plus, sorry, not plus, point, dot, period, tiny little round thing. And here we have our building on this ground. And the last thing I'm going to do is add a road. Now the way I did that was I made a plane. And I'm just going to drag this out a bit. Now at this point, this plane is exactly the same height as the plane it's standing on. And while it looks alright, when we render, it will have all kinds of nasty artifacts because 3D graphics don't like to have polygons on the same plane. They get very confused and upset, and they look ugly when they're upset. So what I'm going to do is press N to bring up this, and the Z seems to be a bit off. I know why, because it's still adding at the location of my 3D cursor, which was, as I said before, slightly off. But just for the sake of showing you, I'm going to reset these to default values, and you can actually see the problem here. You can see this sort of flickering. It's like at various points it doesn't know which one is on top, because neither is on top. So rather than manually bring it up, which can be, you know, very fiddly, and you might get too much separation so it looks like the road is floating, I'm going to go in here and add in something like 0.005 there, and that's basically unnoticeable, but it's enough for the renderer to know which one is on top. So it will never draw the grass on top of the road. Now, really, if you were going to do this, you should probably make it an actual box that's got some height, because a real pavement will have like a curb, but sidewalk, whatever. I'm trying to make this international. But yeah, that should look decent, and if it's still a bit of a problem, we can always take it up a few notches more, but 0.005 should be good enough, I think. Press N to get rid of that again. Now, we have our road, but it's just a grey slab. In edit mode, I can do what I did with the doors. I can press Ctrl R, and I get to divide, create an edge loop here, which isn't much of a loop because it's only one plane. Anyway, I'm going to click there, and actually undo. I'm going to escape to. Okay, that doesn't matter. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go back into. Yeah, I'm still in edit mode. Ctrl R, and before I click, I'm going to press the scroll wheel up to get two of those. Click, and then I've got my. This is to make the white line down the middle of the road. I haven't got any concept art, whatever, you know, references for the roads, but they're fairly simple, so you should have no trouble making one of those just from memory. Or I shouldn't, I should say. Anyway, this should be much thinner, so I'm going to press S and X, and I'm going to drag this down to about there. And now I'm going to... see, I'm in edge select mode now, so because I've made an edge loop. So I'm going to press Control Tab to bring up the face, right click on the middle, and the default material's fine for the road itself. We could mess with it if you want, but I'm going to click New here. It's done the whole thing. Anyway, we'll have to use... Yeah, it's applied a default material to either one of these as well as the middle one. So we'll add a new one, and we'll call this white, and I'll change the diffuse to a higher value. Click Assign, then press Tab, and you can see it's not enough contrast for me, so I'm going to go in here, change this. Actually, we have a material that can serve this purpose already, so I'm going to click here and go to grey, and there we go. That's too grey actually. That doesn't look quite right. But for the sake of brevity, I'm going to leave it as it is. So now we have our road. It's a bit thin. It's a bit short though, so we can solve that simply by pressing S and Y, and then dragging it out to make it really, really long. Click. So here we are. We have a building next to a road. Now let's say you want another building. We can simply right click on that, press Shift D, and we get to move it about. Now if we want to make it move only in one axis, we can hold the middle mouse button, and we get to select which axis with this little dotted line. Move it over so it's the Y axis, let go, and we're moving only on the Y axis now. Left click and we put it down, and we have two buildings. Now you may have noticed these two objects here floating up in the sky. This is our camera, and this is our lamp. And you know, camera, lights, action, that sort of thing. So these come in. These are essential when we're doing things like rendering. And rendering is just another way of saying making this all look much prettier than it does at the moment. And exporting it to images or videos. It does things like apply the lighting properly and so forth. Anyway, you can move around these the camera and the light by the normal means that you move any other... Oops, I clicked there and I moved the 3D camera then, doesn't matter. Yeah, you can move these about like any other object. And if we press 0 on the numpad, we can see what it looks like through our camera. There. And you can see that's actually not a bad framing. So if we click F12, we will get a rendering, and you can see we see some shininess here on these windows. We've got the shadows going, and everything looks nice and smooth. But it doesn't quite look like, it doesn't look real. It looks really plastic and crappy. There's no, because it's only being lit by a single light. So press F11 to come out of that, and we can get out of camera mode just by moving the viewport around like that. And if you want to change where the camera is pointing, one way to do it is to set up your viewport so it's roughly where you want to see the camera. You press Control, Alt, numpad 0, and you get that. And it may crop it a bit more than you meant it to, so you can zoom out. Oh, don't zoom out with that, because then you'll just, well, like you saw, if I zoom out, I'm just sort of changing, I'm not changing where the camera is actually taking its frame. So move out of camera mode there just by rotating the viewport, and then zoom out a bit more, press Control Alt 0 again, and then we've got a nice picture of these two buildings. Press F12, and there we go. F11 to come out of that again. Move the viewport there just to get out of camera mode. And just to finish off, I'm going to have a quick look at the World tab here. Now this doesn't apply to whatever object you've got selected, but everything. And there's a few things here you can click, like the sky stuff. I'm going to change the horizon color to, let's see, some sort of bluish white, I guess. And zenith color. I don't know. You can mess about with this, and it's all fun. And you get a kind of sky look. That'll be rendered basically wherever there is no geometry blocking stuff. Ambient occlusion. What this does is it sort of creates a kind of soft shadowing. It's hard to describe, but you'll see what I mean. Just turn that on. Turn on environment lighting, which just creates a kind of what it's like in daytime, because light bounces. It doesn't just like cast a shadow and nothing happens beyond the edge of the shadow. If you look at a shadow in daytime, it's not pitch black. There's light in there bouncing around from everywhere, and this creates a much more natural look. And that'll just about do. Now you'll be able to see the difference immediately when I render F12. Now you can see it looks terrible because the ambient, the environment lighting is way too high. So I'm going to turn that down to say 0.4. Press F12 again. Still bad. What's going on? Oh, it's because of my ambient color. There, I'll turn that back down to something like that. Press F12 again. There. Now that's starting to look a little bit nicer, isn't it? A bit more like it does in my intro. You've got this kind of stippling here, and the way you fix that is in this gather area. This is basically asking you how much calculation you want it to do with the bouncing of light. So if I turn that back up, say, to 11, F12 again, you see it's taking a lot longer to render, but you can see the result is much smoother. And you can still see the shadows here from the actual lamp itself, but they're much more subdued because they're sort of blanked out by the environment lighting. Press F11 to go back out, and we can move this light around to get some better positions. Now you wouldn't really have a light like this just floating up in the sky. What I did was I used a where is it? A sun lamp. There, click that. This is the position of it doesn't actually matter, and this is a bit of a fiddly thing to control, and I'm not going to get into this, but there's a tutorial on the 3D Buzz thing about that. But I think this will do for a bit of an intro. I'm just going to delete that. If you press the delete key, you get a confirmation box. You just click, and there we go. If you take off all the lights and just leave the ambient lighting, it does look a bit strange. It's like some kind of very bright overcast day where you can't actually see any shadows apart from where the bouncing of light is restricted, like under here. You can even see the edges. This face here is slightly darker because of the shadow of this thing, and that's you can see this kind of very faint shadowing around the corners. But anyway, I think that's sufficient for one video, and I'm not sure how well that came across. I've never done a tutorial before, but I hope it made some sense. And as I said, the tutorials on 3D Buzz are far superior, so they do a lot better job of teaching you the fundamentals. So if anything here confused you, then watching those should clear things up quite a bit. I'm just fiddling about with the camera movement here. There's better ways to do this, but I'm just being silly. There we go, and you can see the sky here. So that was a brief introduction to Blender and how I made my intro. I may do another video about the building of the taxi and some of the other buildings and the animation itself, but depends how well this comes across. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Probably with a video of actual games rather than this stuff.